It's the thing that's actually keeping you stuck, and it's why you feel like you're always doing a diet but never actually getting anywhere. That is the worst place to be in fat loss. You're saying no to dessert, you're trying to be good, you feel restricted, hungry enough to feel like you're dieting, but not really seeing the results to show for it. You're not failing at fat loss. Your deficit just sucks. And that's why eating a bit less and doing this, like, just try to eat as much as you can while still seeing results, or just do a slight deficit, or make it sustainable. It should be balanced, is what's keeping women stuck. And most women have never had a true fat loss phase. What they've had is this burnout phase, a phase where food is low, but training is also feeling really crappy, the sleep, the stress. And so what you're actually in is unintentional maintenance. You're doing everything, you're doing all the hard parts without any of the actual payoff. And this is why I don't like the whole smaller deficits are better because they're sustainable. Well, is it really? And what does sustainable mean? I have a lot to say about that. By the end of this episode, I want you to go away understanding why your past fat loss approaches have kept you in this cycle where you're honestly in a deficit, but nothing's physically changing. It feels as though you should be further along with all the effort that you put into it. Because I want you to stop dragging this thing out forever and finally start to see things change. Because it sucks when you're not technically on a diet, but you're not free from it. You're thinking about food all the time, doing all the mental maths. You can say that you're not, but it kind of just is what we worry about. And then we worry about the weekend, and then why aren't we further ahead by now? But the most frustrating part is that we're doing all of that with not much changing for it, not the way you thought it would. And that is what I want to talk about in this episode. Because this isn't just about whether a bigger deficit is better than a smaller one, or what is the best deficit calories for you to be on. It's about how we can stop you from falling back into this cycle of always trying and restarting and tightening things up and thinking it's a you problem. Because the way we've been taught hasn't allowed for us to build a runway for sustainable change. It's always been the 12-week diets that come back so we can get more money off you. And you're seeing that now in the perimenopause space. What I want you to keep in your mind going through this episode is not just why slow and sustainable may not always be the smarter or the more wise option. Sometimes the real question isn't even whether you should be doing a more aggressive deficit or not. It's more so, have you set yourself up for the fat loss phase to be effective? That's the part that we've been missing all these years. And once we are, how do you do it in a way that actually has the beginning event where you're getting your best results, you're getting rewarded for it without it feeling like you have to, whole is the juice worth the squeeze? Well, we don't even want that to come in question. We want it to be as frictionless as possible, because what we want is an end and a way out that doesn't leave us clinging for straws. So if you're already bracing because I'm going to be talking about faster fat loss in a way that probably makes you think hormones, metabolism, I am not talking about crash dieting or 800 calories. And I am definitely not talking about cutting carbs. If anything, I'm keep your carbs as high as possible dieter. In fact, it's kind of crucial for physique change. And we don't want you living off cookie crumbs and coffee, or doing 2 cardio sessions a day, or any cardio that isn't going to serve you. That is not what fast fat loss is. It's that fat loss is an inherently fast process if you do it right. It's just that most have never been able to do an effective diet phase. It's not your fault. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit more in this episode, especially if you are a woman who's been dieting for years. If you're in your 40s and 50s, even more so, because the online messaging is more targeted to you, your hormones, your metabolism, cortisol, belly fat. I want to bring you that huge sigh of relief, a different way of doing things. Because while those things play some part, they hide the main thing. So that question I want you to keep in mind: how much of your life do you actually want to spend dieting anyway? And is this weird middle place where you're feeling restricted mentally or physically worth that? Especially when you're not really seeing much for it. I'm going to do something a little bit different to start this one first. And that's throw the questions back to you and run through a mental checklist that may feel familiar. Like, I just need to be more consistent. That's literally all it is. Or I do really well during the week, and then the weekend kind of does its thing. Or you don't even really think of approaching the weekend with the same level of planning things out, tracking things, making sure all the ducks are in line. Tomorrow's going to be a good day. I'll make it better. It's even worse when you're thinking about food all the time, eating dinner, already calculating if what I have left, or during the day you're trying to do this macro Tetris with, would I still have room for this? Maybe eating kind of like a nibbly rabbit or a bird, as they say, through the day. I've been at this for years, like actual years, and I'm still having the same conversation with myself. At nighttime when all the thoughts seem to just like flood in. It's like as soon as the alert zone is off, as soon as you're in dinner mode, calming down, maybe once all the family's done its stuff, if you're looking after a big family, that's when the brain finally has its time to just do its thing, whatever it is. Or maybe it's in the morning when you're looking in the mirror and getting changed. All you know is that you've been doing this dieting thing for so long. Or you show up to one of the family Christmas dinners. You haven't seen anyone in a year. You were doing a diet last year and nothing's changed, which is where I always ask the question, are you dieting the wrong way? Mentally dieting forever, but not physically in a deficit is the trap. How many of those were you? Because if more than one hit, I'm hoping this episode gives you everything that you wanted to know about not only why it is so important to understand what body recomposition is, to understand where fat loss fits in the whole process of this, more than anything. I hope it gives you a little insight into the way that I get my clients the best results. Not every client is having this one size fits all approach. The methodology, the whole concept of it, yes, it's pretty much the same, but the way I apply it to them is unique to what I've learnt about them over time, which is where I come to say, are you sure that this phase right now is the right one for you? The time before it differs on the person where they are mentally and physically. Because when I put someone into a fat loss phase, I want it to be freaking down effective. I want them to be seeing results. I want them to feel that progress. I want them to be able to have that, like the satisfaction that their work is paying off, feed into the forward feeding loop of motivation. Like they actually want to keep showing up and doing the thing, because dieting is fucking hard. Because it works and it gets you results really fast. Like you can easily lose fat in a short period of time. It's the muscle part that's hard. That is where so many people get trapped, because most women are never really in a deficit the effective way, because it's hard to set it up the right way. It's knowing your tendencies, your personality for how this pans out. Because sure, you can do the slow and sustainable way, or you can do the way that most people try to do it, which is build muscle and lose fat at the same time, which I went into full depth with this with one of my clients who, after years of trying to get rid of fat, like literally dieting since high school, she lost weight, quite a little weight at first, but never could get anything else off without gaining it back or more, and then got to a place where nothing would even come off. There's a reason for that. And it wasn't something she was aware of. And it was through the coaching process that it brought that to light. And she finally did a dieting phase with me just recently, and it was just melting off. Like she felt the differences within that week. By the end of the week, she already felt herself getting closer to something she never thought she had. And it's kind of weird to say that in a week, but when you've been struggling for so long, the difference that you feel compared to what you would usually feel. For the first time ever, she had no food noise. You can easily be eating a lot of food and still have your brain call all the alarm signals that you're dieting because of what's happening in your brain. This is where hormones play a role, and hormones aren't just the sex hormones. Like hormones include your cortisol, your norepinephrine, like all the brain neurotransmitters. It all is connected. Okay, we'll talk about slow fat loss first because I think it is worth being a little fair about. You could make a case for the slower approach because it has more flexibility. You'll get less hunger, kinda. More scope for socials, going out to eat, having like being okay with a little bit of wine on the weekend without that impacting anything. If you want to go out with your husband for date night, although I would be really careful with wine in fat loss phases. Again, as I said, this is why the phases are so important and where aggressive does kind of have its one up there. I want to acknowledge that some seasons of life just make sense for this. If you've just had a baby, if you're going through something particularly demanding with work or family, if your mental load is genuinely at a ceiling, like you have all of these deadlines, you have maybe you're doing extra homework, maybe the just it can be anything from just conversations with people who struggle. It's never really about the diet or the training. All these other factors either help or hinder everything else that's going on, and it's all connected. It is all connected. Like, how can you be consistent in showing up when your life is a complete bomb of a stress fest? But I would also argue then, is this really a great time to have fat loss on your mind? There's so much other stuff we could be doing that potentiates the fat loss phase. You don't want to pile a harder fat loss phase on top of all of that. This is what I see also, because the problem with slow isn't what people say is the problem, like, oh, you're just going to rebound, you're going to gain it back, and all this other bull crap. Or you're going to lose muscle. It's like, well, you actually shouldn't lose muscle if you're doing it the right way and if you set it up to start with. And again, if you built up your training capacity, if you're lifting really strong, if you're able to create a strong and loud enough training demand on your muscles, if that is not there, that's a different story. That's why I am so adamant on this stuff. The slow fat loss, when you are eating in a deficit, even if it's a slight deficit, a slow fat loss rate, you aren't in a place to be building muscle. You can bring up the studies that say, oh, you can do both. Okay, well, who were they testing? And the fact that they were testing them means it was in a lab, means that they were getting pushed to failure. They were getting pushed beyond the burn, the ouch, the this, the that. They were being monitored. It's completely different in the context of real life. Even so, it's like, okay, well, what's the consistency? What's your training program like? Are all your variables the exact same variables as theirs? And then if we bring in the age gap, I'll have to do a follow-up part 2 and part 3 because there's just so much to cover on why this is so important. When you're trying to do this both thing, yeah, okay, sure, you will see results at first. You always will because you're new to it. But from there, and actually the biggest trap with this is it will feel like you are building muscle and losing fat at the same time because you see more of it. You see the lines, the definition. That's just because you're losing the fat and you're uncovering it. We all have some baseline of muscle, especially if we started off more overweight. And especially if we are doing some form of training. It doesn't just poof. It's what happens after that and how long you stay trying to do this thing for. I'm not saying this part to be harsh, but I literally see this all the time. And that's that this whole slow approach, this keep it sustainable approach. I've had clients doing this initially as well until we learn how good it feels to just get the fat off, get in and do it hard. I don't really enforce it the first time around because I don't like the first time around, it's me getting to learn new. One of the clients I bring up, my God, like it's insane the success after trying to get by on like 1100, 1200, all the cardio, everything. And she was, quote unquote, doing everything right too. These clients, 3 of the ones I'll be mentioning, are in their 50s. Fat loss isn't inherently harder because you're over 50, because you're perimenopausal. Fat loss is still the same process. It's still the same simplicity. It can be the same ease as well. There's nothing really stopping that except everything that's happening outside of the main factor, which is what's your life like now. Awareness. Do you know what to focus on? It can give you the permission to fit a little bit too much into it. Well, it's just this one event. Well, it's just this one time I tried to make it fit within my calories. It's like, well, you can only maneuver things all so much as we get through the process. That I'm taking in a really unorthodox approach with one of my girls because she was willing to do it. It's something that she can commit to. But this conversation of allowing these little things in, like, yeah, we want, like, if you're taking a slower approach, that's typically why you take it. But if you're a female, it's probably the worst thing you can do because your allowance is already so small. One restaurant meal can be your whole day's worth of calories. In fact, most of the time it's beyond that. There are many meals from restaurants that are above 1,000 calories. Some of them are 1,200, some of them are 1,400. I put up a post asking what people thought the calories were on this plate of food, and what did I get? 700. That definitely has to be between 800 and 900. No, it was actually like it was a decent plate. It was more around 1,500. It wasn't mine. It came with like the entree and half a dessert, a small dessert, like ice cream, half scoop, the entree, and then the main meal. That is most of your calories. More if you're dieting on 1,200 calories, which this is kind of the sustainable approach. So I would assume you're not. This is also where I would ask the question, would you be wanting to live your life on these, come on, like 1,600 calories, honestly, if that's what you're dieting on, anything like that. Like dieting is hard, full stop. You're still in a deficit. When you're in a deficit, if you're in a proper deficit, you're going to be hungry. It is still going to be hard. You're still going to have to do everything meticulously unless you want to stay in it your whole life. That's what I mean by, is this really sustainable? Because I would argue that it's the biggest myth that's out there. Like you hear people say it all the time that a smaller deficit would be a good way to approach it because more flexibility, more sustainability. But it's the biggest myth that's out there. Is it really sustainable if you never really end up getting there? It just feels like, again, you're doing all the calculations, you're doing all the hard things, but what is it actually giving you in the end? Recommitment, meal prep, feeling organized, and then okay, it's Friday, and what the hell happened on Thursday? And holy shit, it's the weekend tomorrow. And the spiral starts again. And I see people go around in these circles of 6, 9, 12 months and really like getting to the end of 12 months and seeing very little progress. That is where I beg the question. You just didn't see many results. It became difficult to stick to. So is that really sustainable? We didn't put in as much effort into being as meticulous. We're drained from dieting because we've been doing it for ages. How about the training? Like, how is your training progressing? The thing that actually is meant to be building the muscle that you're hoping to reveal. In a fat loss phase, you're hoping to maintain as much as possible. And then it's the kids' party, and then, oh, it's your birthday coming up. You got a few meals out. Your husband wants to celebrate something. It's when progress becomes this level of invisible, trying to do both at the same time, that motivation kind of drops. And then we try to find the next thing. It's like we're already in this lowish place. And then someone comes around, where the hell are you wanting to cut from when it's supposedly the cut for bikini season, which you would have heard my last episode. That's why the last episode exists. Ultimately, at the end of 12 months, you probably have not achieved what you said you were going to do. Whereas at the end of 12 weeks, we would have wanted to lose at least 4 kilos. I don't really do scale weight, but I also want to say that the number of kilos lost, that's 8 to 9-ish pounds for you Americans out there. But it really depends on your starting point too. Because if you're a smaller frame, that's a different story. If you're someone who's just trying to lose the last 5 pounds, that's a much different story. That's the problem with slow and sustainable, in my opinion, because I heard someone say it really smartly, and it was like, trying to just make it sustainable is giving you permission to never really commit. But do you honestly want to be trying to diet your whole life when you could be living literally most of it feeling in abundance? It's really hard to know. It's really hard to even answer that when you've never experienced anything like it. Especially when you're like the fish in the water, where you feel like everything's pretty good. Like, it's not that bad. The fish doesn't know it's in water until you experience, oh my God, there's such thing as land. Holy shit, was I in water? Actually, you wouldn't even know what water is because I've been swimming in it the whole time. There's just this weird blue substance. Wow, is that the sky? And then the fish just becomes curious about what this thing was that it was in and why I was so trapped in it. And it's that curiosity that you need here too. Like this is the whole point. Like, it's demoralizing. It honestly is. It's demoralizing. You think there's something wrong with your body, and it just makes it even harder for you to avoid all the nonsense that is online sold to you because you feel like your body is a problem. It is your hormones. It is your metabolism. And even my client said that herself. She's trying to get through all this menopausal bullshit. Like, I am not dismissing menopause. I have so many clients going through all of the symptoms. It is not the thing that's holding you back. It's what you're doing during it. If you're still trying to force a burnt out body harder, a burnt out system harder, your recovery is so low, the best thing you can be doing is doing everything you can to maintain muscle. And like I said, if you're in a deficit, you're not building anything, especially if you're over that age of 35, because you're losing muscle by the year if you're not actively trying to build it. That's why the men belly is such a big thing. But then we also have to, I'm going to do a whole episode on perimenopause as well, but how we feel in our belly isn't always our belly. Just like you can feel watery, you can feel puffy around your menstrual cycle. We just kind of forget about that for the other killer weeks. It is not the intention to go into something that's like a, let's just call it a battle, the battle of fat loss, to have very little progress to show for it. The thing about slow fat loss, the thing about any fat loss, actually, any fat loss is it is hard because you're still having to do all of these things. Just because it's slow does not mean that you're not focusing on making sure you're tracking everything to the nth degree. Like, you want to be more meticulous in fat loss so you don't extend the phase and end up turning it into a lifestyle. And that's why I started this podcast episode off with, how much time do you actually want to spend dieting? Slow is not automatically safer, but fast is not automatically reckless. I would not really recommend fast to people that don't have the guidance through it and that have not learnt the other things that matter outside of the fat loss. I'll be going into an episode as well on why calories aren't the only thing to pay attention to, because I'm sick of it all being about what you're eating, what you're training, what you're doing for cardio, because that's not the point. And you can easily be doing all of those things right, and it equal out to be some deficit, and you still not lose anything because we're focusing on the wrong things. It's not all about those elements of calories you're eating and then the work that you're doing there. There are so many other things that can impact all of this. Fat loss is hard. Being slow doesn't make it easier. It's the discomfort that I would say makes it harder, because you're going to have to deal with that for so much longer. Think about it though. Slow fat loss means you're mentally tracking, watching, calculating, feeling guilty about the weekend, Thanksgiving and Christmas, or any of that. How are you actually handling those events and what's going to happen after? And then the vacation, then recommitting, doing really well until Thursday, and then having the thing, and then the thing, and then the thing, and then the, you know what I mean? Rinse and repeat for 9, 12, 18 months. Like, since when did this mental dieting thing become less exhausting than the actual thing? You can be eating more. I just see so many women who've been doing this whole slow approach for years, grabbing onto anything desperately because they've never actually set it up. And that's why I want you guys to pause and reflect and ask yourself the serious question. The sustainable argument that I'm going to bring up is, first, me clearing up that I'm not talking about those stupid, like, rapid fat loss things that are like shred this, shred that, go fasting on friggin' iced tea and whatever else is out there. The more, like, the thing with aggressive fat loss phases, with fast fat loss, is that nothing matters more here than considering how long we are in this phase for. That is the most important thing. We need to have it set up so that we don't get greedy. The first time I put one of my clients into this, because she's been with me for years and we've been through this process, we did the first one that I told you, it's me getting to know her. Straight after that, the whole fear was, I could tell that it's because she's still not where she's at yet. There was a fear of increasing calories because she didn't want to gain the weight back. She didn't want to go back to where she was before. She didn't want to lose what she's got so far in the fat loss phase. I anticipated all of that. I'm like, this is all very normal. And in fact, because everything was still going to plan, her body was still changing. Again, it depends on your starting point. The one that gets used against, like, won't you just put it all back on? That's probably the main thing that I want to address here. The way that you've probably done it before, you probably said, I've done it hard, I've done it fast. Well, it probably just wasn't the right approach that you took. And that makes sense. It's something that does require that one-on-one coaching, but it's not like the bodybuilding prep stuff. And a lot of the stuff out there comes without the mindset element. I have so many clients that come to me from other coaches, and I can tell that in their check-ins, in their approaches, they were never taught where to focus. Their check-ins and the feedback is all centered around the photos, the food accuracies to the nth degree. Did I say progress photos, scale weight, measurements, getting in those weekly data points, which we never really use as data. We use it as this emotional, whether we're doing well or not, or whether we're on track or not, or whether we're whatever, good or bad. But that's not the point. We need to learn where to focus in a way that actually gets us what we want with body recomposition And that takes us away from the obsession that is eventually going to burn out, that is eventually going to sabotage us. If we're going to, coaches in general, give in whenever the client wants to shred for something or feels like she's getting a little quote unquote fat or things aren't working, instead of actually having the hard conversation, instead of actually explaining it, doing the hard thing, there's the difference between kind and nice. You might be playing nice. The client came to you to get a result. It's our job to lead them there with questions that help them, the client, to then realize that we are the ones that are patient in this. We're not putting any pressure on you. We want to see you succeed, and we want to see you get the results you want. That's why we say things the way we do. And it can be really difficult because you can be making progress in the mindset wise, and then something happens exactly how it's just like forming any behavior. And it's why it's so important. There is this study with aggressive versus slow. And in fact, they were supervised, coached along the process. They lost more. They built momentum. They got results. They didn't actually regain the weight back. They got a slight regain, which I'm going to actually touch on soon. They sat lower than the slow group, which regained, funny enough, from a slower loss. They were probably burnt out. Studies that do the aggressive dieting phases the right way they should be done. Again, the time and what happens in between them matters. And sometimes it might be something you just need to do one bout of, and then you go back to thriving. Sometimes you need to do one bout of, take a little break away, and then repeat that a couple of times, and then go back to living. You might need to do it again after then. I call them little bricks. Sometimes you just have one brick here, and you may find that you need another brick maybe in a year or 2 years' time. But the time before that might have been 2 or 3 years to get to where you are now. Maybe even 1 year, maybe even 8 months, who knows? It depends on your starting point. If you're skinny fat, it depends on how long it takes you to break past that mental barrier of where you need to focus, and then all the other things there. Where petite women in particular fall into this, and perimenopause, I might have to go a little bit deeper into that in the future as well. So if you have any questions, do ask. But right now, I think the most important thing to come back to is when I say short, sharp, faster, it's not like this stupid weird protocol that has you on like 800 calorie days or doing 2 sessions a day and burning yourself out with cardio. Like this, one of my clients, we need to protect the things that matter most in an aggressive phase. I am actually going to go a little bit more into detail than I expected. She came to me, she has a history of restless legs, stress, some other things. She was feeling really good up until the end of last week. She was feeling amazing up until week 3. And what we had to do was do an overhaul of her food, because I know her personality. Chocolate is a big thing. Emotional eating was a big thing. She came to me thinking she had a food addiction, thinking that she had a problem because she could not stop binge eating on chocolatey stuff. Food in general. She loved food. Always thought about food. Thought it would be impossible to ever lose anything. And this was like, it never really was the case that it was this severe, but it was all the constant years of dieting and all the stuff she did before that it became this louder problem. And she was very worried. That was something that we worked through as well. She was training hard and heavy, but it wasn't hard and heavy in the way that actually builds muscle. In this whole process, the last 2 years, we've built so much muscle, so much muscle. Her whole body composition has changed because she's new to it. So the first year she could do both. When you're new to proper training, you can do both. Then we did that testing fat loss phase. It came out, and now the same process, but because this one is going harder at it, and her training capacity has built up so much more, so it's demanding a shit ton more calories from her body, a shit ton more fat, a shit ton more energy, burning a shit ton more, aka it's amplifying the fat loss process right now while keeping her leaner, as in it's keeping the muscle because there's such a big stimulus. What we had to do is pick one of those chocolates. What I said was, well, it's up to you. You can have all the 3 chocolates and this will be a struggle, but I would argue that you would feel better having a great night's sleep, having way more energy, feeling strong in the gym, not having it drain whatever's left of you. So here's an approach that we can take with your food, with your dessert. Here's something we can do with your dinner so that it keeps you nice and full into the next day as well, and you sleep soundly without your legs doing what they're doing. Because there were some things that were missing from her dinner and her dessert, which I will go into. This is an intentional, effective deficit, which means we do need structure. We need less decision-making in this. We need things planned out. We've already built the habit of planning out her food for the whole week. So she plans it out, but it doesn't mean that she doesn't go out and have flexibility, because she does that. Was doing that, enjoying herself in maintenance, getting a friggin' Subway roll, It's like her happy thing because she was scared of bread her whole life. She's able to have that flexibility and so much of it outside of it, which is the majority of her time. And she knows that now, so she can easily lean into that. She actually said that she would prefer to not worry about the chocolate. She can have it later because she knows what it's like to be on the other side now. She's been there, she's done it. She knows the dieting phase isn't forever. Her nervous system is calm. Her brain is calm. It's not going to sabotage her. What we did have to do was then put carbs into the two most important places. Because in fat loss, the things that matter most, recovery and training. So we needed carbs before she slept. Yes, right before bed, right before bed. A good amount of carbs. More carbs in her dinner, in the dessert. And her pre-training meal was in focus. What we want is to actually feel good through the day and not have to replenish the fuel that we used in our training session, which will just leave us craving everything at nighttime. It makes a harder process less hard. But again, it needs a defined endpoint. And that's what we're talking about through the process. It's not until I feel good in my body, until I'm lean enough, until I've lost enough. That's where you get trapped. That's why most people have been dieting their whole lives, because you don't feel like you're lean enough to earn the extra calories or the bump up of food once you finish the diet. So that is really important. The exit phase is probably the most important because you can't just exit it and be like, cool, I can finally add in this. I can finally add in that, because that is a recipe for disaster, especially within your brain and dopamine systems and just your whole hormonal system. Again, I'm not just talking sex hormones here. I'm talking leptin, ghrelin, hunger, appetite, cravings, what your body's doing on the inside. It's also not great to just bring your calories up a little. That's the point of an aggressive fat loss phase. It's not something that's an afterthought. You need to have this planned out. That's why what you do before a fat loss phase is so important. I cannot leave out the most important point, and that is what I mentioned about the weight regain. You cannot ignore this part, because as soon as you see anything feel bigger, get bigger, feel fuller, the scale go up, you're gonna freak the fuck out. But if you did an aggressive diet, you're going to see that go up, and it is not fat. Even if you did a normal diet, it's just in an aggressive diet, you get a little bit more replenishment from the carbs, from the water. And hopefully your training is still at some form of capacity. But if your training performance is also coming up, there's also the increased recovery cost of that, which brings in the water, the inflammation, which is a normal byproduct of just training harder. Do know that as well, because that is a normal part. And if you freak out at that, that's going to sabotage you more. You need to not be scared of it, but understand it. Just the same as you're going to understand this. The scale's going to do all its funky shit anyway, regardless of whether you're doing a calorie deficit or not. Maybe it might not even move towards the end of an aggressive one, or somewhere close to the end. Because when stress is really high, which dieting is a stress, you're going to hold water as well. I want you to understand that, and then ask yourself the question, should you be losing fat right now? Is this harder than it should be? More of a struggle than it should be? Because women who've been in a chronic slight deficit for a year or two, that's where everything is getting worse. Or even trying to do both. Or even, like I said, you're in unintentional maintenance. Training performance, where is that? What are your hormones doing? What's your metabolism doing? Because those things can be restored pretty damn easily just by starting off on the right foot for the next steps. It's genuinely hard to say and hard to hear, even as a conversation with yourself, because we can talk ourselves out of a lot of things in the moment, especially when emotions are high. Like, it can feel really logical at one point, and then you just go into your day, and all of a sudden it's like, nah, take that back, bro. Or maybe your body just naturally goes into its routine and it's just repeating the cycle. This is the thing. We want to build the capacity first. That's so huge. We want to build the body. Are you putting any focus on the things that actually do that? The one that you're trying to reveal, the tone, the hardness, especially when you're thinking about what your belly's going to do through perimenopause, or you're complaining about that. Like, I'm going to dig into most of this in the next part of the series because it's so important. Like, the body that you're picturing, that body, the one with shaped legs, the lifted glutes, the shoulders that are defined, they're capped, that comes from what you do in the gym. And it will only come from that if you've been focusing on the right things, building the right things, and I mean more than muscle, and how your nutrition then matches that. It doesn't have to be this obsessive process, and it feels like it's a lot. Like anything that you've been doing for ages, like your job as an example, that would feel like a lot for someone trying to learn. But because you've been doing it for ages, it doesn't feel like that. And as soon as things become a lot more routine, you naturally drift. I was going to say gravitate, drift. Let's not be grifters, please. you naturally gravitate. Or was I going to say drift? They're both the same. Towards the things that do make you feel good, that do get you the results, because it's a fast forward loop. But sometimes life happens and that's okay. And you also become okay with accepting that because now you've done the things, you trust the process. And that's the thing. Like my case is for neither. My case for neither, if now isn't the right time, is if you're already in this state where, like, honestly, we want you to get results. That's what matters. Because there's a version of this process that works where you build, where you eat to support that, where it feels good and not scary. And you let your body change in a way that actually, like, it feels good. It doesn't feel like this friction. That is what I want you to build toward. That's what this whole series is about. So I hope this helps. If you could leave me a 5-star review if this helped, it would mean a lot to me. And if there's anything else that you want me to cover, let me know. Go onto my Instagram, transformxruby. DM me recomp if you want someone to support you through this, because I know how scary it can be. I will meet you where you're at. I'll help you make sense of what feels like a never-ending battle, because the answer isn't the same for everyone. The principles, yeah, okay. But for you, with how you will respond best to it, many of the time when we are focusing so much on it, it becomes that much harder because we're so focused on it. Whereas if we just did the things and let the process take care of itself, it kind of just happens when all that energy is going where it belongs. Anyway, I'll see you on the next one, and thanks for listening.